talk a bit today about taking part in the good society. Now, what do I mean by taking part? Well, taking part in social activities and having time to hang out with our friends and family, doing meaningful and enjoyable things, taking part in our communities, and taking part in our democratic structures and processes. And I think there's probably three main barriers to those to taking part at the moment. Those are poverty and financial insecurity that we've talked about a fair bit today already, social insecurity, which I'll explain a bit more about what I mean, and our democratic structures themselves. But on the bright side, I think there's a whole number of really great solutions out there and ways that we can get over those barriers and knock them down. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of them, including a citizen's income and participatory budgeting as two nice little things that might make quite a difference to us. So to go back to the first of those barriers, poverty and financial inclusion we talked about a fair bit today, and it's very clear that it is still a massive scar in our society. 1 in 5 children in Scotland is living in poverty right now. In parts of Glasgow and the west of Scotland, that's 1 in 2. It's half of all children living in poverty. And the Child Poverty Action Group reckons that another 600,000 children UK-wide are going to be plunged into poverty because of the UK government's spending cuts and welfare changes, just by the way of this Parliament. Now that's pretty awful, but how does that actually impact on our participation in society? Well, if you're living on £71 a week on job seekers allowance, you might just about manage to eat. You might just about manage to put some energy in your gas or electricity meter. You might, if you're awfully lucky, manage to spend money on a mobile phone and communicating with people. But going out for a drink with your friends, going to see a film, even getting a bus to go and interact with other people, those things are out of reach of huge swathes of our population. And it's not just people who are reliant on benefits for their income that this affects. More than many of the 500,000 people that Catherine pointed out are now reliant on food banks for their money, are in work. These are people who are in low-paid work, reliant on tax credits to make up the gap between the minimum wage and the living wage and the money it takes to have a real life. So we can see that there is a relationship between poverty and participation. And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the other JRF, actually came out with a report last week that proved this. And to summarise rather briefly, it said that participation decreases significantly as incomes decrease. But for the bottom 30%, for the people in the lowest 30% of incomes, any change in income actually makes very little difference, because you're already in that place where you have to make those incredibly difficult choices between heating and eating, those real basics of life. So any extra income makes very little difference to whether you can take part in any meaningful way. I'd also argue that to take part in your community and to take part in any kind of democratic structures, you have to feel like you're part of something bigger, that you have a kind of stake in that society, and that that society cares about you. And at a moment when being poor is something that we blame on the poor themselves, when it is something that seems deviant and other, and recent research actually in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago showed that we now see people on benefits as less than fully human. Is it any wonder that people who are living in poverty feel that they are excluded themselves? Why would you take part in a society that views you as less than fully human? Why would you make that effort? But of course, it's not just people who are in poverty who are affected by exclusion. Social insecurity is a really huge part of the problem here as well. We are one of the richest countries in the world. We are asset rich, but as we've talked about already, we are time poor. We work more hours for less pay in real terms, just so that we can spend less time with the people we care about, doing less of the stuff we love and care about, so that we can borrow money that we don't have to pay for stuff that we don't need, and all the while we're wondering why we're so unhappy and so unfulfilled in life. The consumerist drive means that we are consumers first and citizens second. And what that actually translates into is that the tools at our disposal to have any kind of agency, any choice over our own lives, are those of consumerism. They are switching energy companies, moving to a different supermarket, and they are utterly meaningless. They make no difference in our real lives. And at a political level, we're seeing voter turnout about 30% if we're lucky. Involvement in political parties is tiny. And is it any wonder, really? I mean, if your only chance to take part in a democratic process is once every 5 years to go out and vote for someone who may or may not get elected, who may or may not be in power, and who may or may not, once in power, actually do any of the things that they promised to do at the outset, is it any wonder that the majority of us don't get involved in these things? But, okay, that's awful. That's lots of really bad things. How can we fix any of this stuff? Well, I think from a green perspective, and these are sort of values that are shared across the political spectrum, there are two key things that I think could make a difference here. The first is the citizens' income. Citizens' income, if it's a new concept to you, has been around for a long time now, but it's at the actual heart of Green Party policies. And it's a basic level of income that provides enough money to live off for everyone, every man, woman and child, regardless of your existing wealth. And what that does is it provides a genuine social security net below which you cannot fall. It removes the stigma of means testing. It removes the difference, the otherness of poverty. And it means that we all have a starting point with which we can then go and look at how much time we actually spend working, how much time we spend with the people that matter to us on the things that we care about. And I think that can make a real difference. The problem, of course, is the political will to implement something like that at a time when we're seeing the exact opposite happening in Westminster. And I'd like to think that perhaps the levers of an independent Scotland might be one way in which we could implement a citizens' income. I think it would be an incredibly brave move, but one which would make an incredible difference to Scotland and give us a chance to really tackle poverty once and for all and make a difference to the way that we live our lives and participating in our society. And the second is participatory budgeting, which sounds awfully jargony and horrible, but actually is quite a basic concept. It's an idea that's come over from Brazil and is now alive and well in Scotland, in Leith in Edinburgh, where I stay. And what it is basically the local council gives a chunk of money to the local community, and the community gets to decide how they spend that money. Community projects, local volunteer organisation groups of people get together and decide how they want to spend some money doing things to improve their local area, work for people who need a bit of an extra hand. And we all come together on a special day. We kind of make pitches for this is my community group, this is what I want to do with this money. And we get 900 people in a room, as we did in March this year, many of whom have never taken part in any kind of community activity before. Most of us had no idea that all of this was going on our doorsteps. And we're now getting involved in community associations, meeting our neighbours, doing something that makes a difference in our local area, and feeling like we're actually participating in something that matters. It's a very simple thing to run. It only cost the council about 20 grand. It's just a tiny drop in the ocean, and it's something that could be rolled out right now, right across Scotland. So those are two things that I think could work really well. And I'll just leave you with a wee quote from J.K. Galbraith. He said that there are many visions of the good society, but the treadmill is definitely not one of them. Thanks.